Hey guys, and welcome to Petrol Ped. Now, if you ask me what my favourite performance saloon car is, you might be surprised. I wouldn't say a BMW M3. I'd say Alfa Romeo Giulia Quadrifoglio every time. I think they look beautiful, they sound amazing, driving dynamics are great, and you also get the feeling that if you don't treat them with a little bit of respect, they're going to kill you. The only problem with the Giulia Quadrifoglio is it's quite a pricey car. So the question is there a way of getting 80% of a Giulia Quadrifoglio for much, much less money? Well, I reckon there is, and it's one of them. An Alfa Romeo Giulia Veloce. I was actually at the Goodwood Festival of Speed the year they unveiled the Giulia. I was standing just 10 feet away from the car as they pulled the covers off, and I remember the intake of breath from everybody because it was a beautiful car back then, groundbreaking, so different from everything else. And all these years later, I still think it's one of the most beautiful saloon cars on the market. I love them. And I've never owned an Alfa Romeo, and I know they come with a whole lot of baggage around reliability and dealer network and all the negative things that people throw at an Alfa. But they are magnificent things to drive, and I've been very, very lucky. I've driven a range of different Giulias. I've driven the Quadrifoglio. I drove the AR Racing Edition up the hill at the Festival of Speed. And then the following year, I drove the Alfa Romeo Giulia GTA up the hill. Amazing cars. The big challenge with the Giulia Quadrifoglio, the top of the range car, is they're quite expensive. New, they're in the region of £78,000. Now you get an awful lot of car for the money. But this is the Giulia Veloce. And these come in at under £45,000. That's not a million miles off of being half the price, and they are by no means half the car. First up, I think they look amazing and have a huge amount of Quadrifoglio DNA. The most noticeable of those are the teledial wheels, an iconic design feature on an Alfa Romeo, and I think they set the car off brilliantly. And then you get the little Veloce badging on the front wing letting you know the trim spec. I need to apologise for the state of this car. All will become apparent very shortly, but I've been driving this car all week. I'm actually filming this review the wrong way round. I've just driven back from a weekend in the Cotswolds. I've done, I don't know, nearly 500 miles in the car so far, and it is filthy, and I just have a very short time window, especially from the weather point of view. I haven't really got time to wash the car, and also I'm using it tomorrow, so it's pointless really. So apologise for the car being a bit mingy, but teledial wheels for the win. The Giulia design has evolved over the years. This is a model year 24 car. The one thing, it's not quite as aggressive at the back as the Quadrifoglio. You don't get the little lip spoiler. You only get 2 exhausts rather than 4. But it's still a handsome looking car at the rear. I guess the big difference between this Veloce and the Quadrifoglio is what's under the bonnet. Now, if you tune into the channel regularly, you will have seen that I drove the model year 24 Quadrifoglio just a month or so ago. Got it quite sideways, mega thing. And under the bonnet of one of those is a twin turbo V6 in current form, producing 510 horsepower all through the rear wheels. And there's a mechanical limited slip diff on the latest Giulia Quadrifoglio. In the Veloce, the V6 has gone and it's replaced with a 2-litre 4-cylinder turbo, and this thing is producing 280 horsepower, and that's going through an 8-speed paddle shift gearbox, and that's enough to get this car down the road in good order. It will do 0 to 60 in comfortably under 4 seconds, about 3.6 seconds, so this car is no slouch at all. I guess the main difference, the missing element of the Quadrifoglio, is that barky V6 and the cracks and whip cracks and pops and bangs. This little 2-litre isn't quite as sonorous, isn't quite as much of a soundtrack. It's quite quiet actually, but it delivers enough punch to put a big smile on your face. And bang for buck wise, for the money, I think it's really, really impressive. Inside this car, to be honest, it's not a great difference between one of these and a Quadrifoglio. I guess slightly less exotic materials. I can't see any carbon fibre in here, and you might have slightly lower grade plastics and a bit less leather. But these seats, they look all right. They're very supportive. The steering wheel is excellent. You still get the steering column mounted aluminium shifters, and this central console and infotainment system, they're exactly the same. So actually from the driver's seat, it doesn't really feel a great difference to a Quadrifoglio. I guess the throttle response is obviously going to be a bit different. The noise that you get is going to be a bit different. But the question is, when you drive this down a road, how much of a difference is there? What performance difference is there between this Veloce and the Quadrifoglio? You know, it isn't half the money's worth. It isn't 50% of the performance. So if we spring back to earlier on today, I had to drive back from the Cotswolds. I had the Petrol Ped with me and I took it down some really nice roads and put it through its paces. Now it's interesting, I've spent lots of time in Alfa Romeo Giulias, but they've always been the Quadrifoglio, the twin turbo V6 500 horsepower version. But this Veloce is really interesting for me because from the outside, apart from the Quadrifoglio shields on the front wings, the styling's very similar. It doesn't have that little lip spoiler, but it's got the iconic teledial wheels. It's got two exhausts out the back. It just has this really classy, really understated look from the outside. And when you drive it, it doesn't have the noise and the theatre of the Quadrifoglio, but by goodness me, is it a good road car. This little 2-litre turbo's got plenty of grunt, coupled with this semi-auto. Now you can drive it round in drive mode as normal. I've got the drive selector, the DNA, the dynamic, natural and then advanced efficiency, the different settings. I'm in dynamic mode at the moment. It doesn't have the race setting, you only get that on the Quadrifoglio. But it gives you a really nice throttle response, and it's just got a lovely feeling to it. This is one of my favourite bits of road here in the Cotswolds, Fish Hill. I'd absolutely love to cycle my bike up this hill, but it's a very steep but very twisty bit of road, very popular with the local motorcyclists, much to the dismay of the local residents. But it does have a really nice feeling. The front end isn't as sharp as a Quadrifoglio. It doesn't have that Ferrari-esque steering that the Quad has, but it's still very nice and very balanced. The other thing, because you've got a little bit less power, it's rear-wheel drive, but even in these damp conditions, you can feel a bit more confident to get on the throttle coming out of the corners. You know, I'm sure the car would step out if you really aggravated it, but you don't get the feeling that the car's going to try and kill you at every turn of the steering wheel and depress of the throttle like you do when you're driving a Quadrifoglio, especially if you're in race mode with the traction control backed off. But yeah, on a nice long journey, this is a super, super comfortable place to be. And I've got the little petrol pup with me today. My last road trip I had the older dog, so we again separated them. Petrol pup is at home. I've been here in the Cotswolds at my godson's 18th birthday, and they've got two dogs, one of which is a very boisterous 6-month-old Wheaten Terrier who's very, very cute, Margot, and lots of people, so not really something that the older pup Darcy is a big fan of. But this one, she's hardcore, she doesn't care, but as you can see, she's a bit tired because we had a late night. So I've got a couple of hours of driving, and I thought I would just, through my journey, talk to you a little bit more about this car. One of the great things about being in the Cotswolds is there are some lovely roads. So I'm going to put the car into manual override and use the paddles to shift. I'm in dynamic mode. I'm going to drop down a couple of gears and just... So it does have quite a nice engine tone, but it's quite quiet. If you've got the music on, it's actually quite difficult to listen to the engine and listen to when you need to change the rev. So you're kind of looking at the rev count. You don't do it so much by feel, but more by view. And these paddle shifters on the Veloce model, they're straight out of the Quadrifoglio, and they are brilliant. The gearbox is super slick on the way up and on the way down. They are, I think they get a bit of getting used to. They do kind of get in the way when you're moving to the indicator stalk or to the wash wipe stalk. You can sometimes feel your fingers banging up against them. But I do like the steering column mounted paddles. They give you a sense of occasion and a sense of drama. And they make you want to really drive this car and push on. And when you get a nice bit of open flowing road, it's a super bit of kit. My only criticism, not my only criticism, but a criticism, when you have a Quadrifoglio and you go into race mode, you get a really big indicator on the dash as to what gear you're in. In this car, if you are manually shifting, there is an indicator, but it's tiny. It just says M6 at the moment. And I know you can count in your head, but I find when I'm coming into a corner, I always like to just double check what gear I'm in to work out what gear I'm gonna, you know, select for the exit of the corner. And it just takes a little bit of extra focus to come down and see, oh, okay. And I just like a bigger indicator of the gear for when I'm driving in flappy paddle manual override. When you do change down, it's very responsive, and in dynamic mode, on the way up, it's almost like a bit of a push in the back. You can very much feel that new gear going in. And it just has a lovely feel on the road. As I've said already, I still think for me, even though the Giulia has been around a long time now, it's still one of the most beautiful saloon cars on the road for me. The external styling is right up there. And it doesn't really need to change a great deal to still look fresh and new and just stand out from the crowd that can look a bit plain and a bit vanilla. I love the styling of the Giulia, and this Veloce just has that sporty edge, and arguably is the, I think I've called it before, the thinking man's Quadrifoglio, because you buy one of these, I guess you're not going to have the worries of poorer fuel economy, although I'm averaging about 30 miles to the gallon over the last 260 miles, which I don't think is too bad, to be honest. And I know I wouldn't be doing that if I was in the Quadrifoglio with its V6 twin turbo, but I am missing out on all of that auditory drama and auditory pleasure that you get in a Quadrifoglio. And then I guess just in terms of things like servicing costs and consumables like brakes and brake pads and those types of things, you're going to be spending less money on one of these to keep them on the road. So if you want that visual prowess of a Giulia Quadrifoglio, but you really want to do the miles, you're going to put long miles, maybe it's your company car and you're going to want to put a lot of miles on the clock, then maybe this Veloce is the car to go for, because it certainly has the looks and the visuals. It's that gear on the way in. That's just delicious, this car. Absolutely delicious. It just has this way of enveloping you in the drive and the driving experience. The driving position's great. I've got the ability to get the steering wheel in a fantastic position, really nice and close to me. And then internally, there's quite a lot to like in here. Again, it hasn't changed a great deal. There's elements of it for me starting to look a little bit dated. I'm not a fan of the infotainment system. Really sorry, Alfa Romeo. I'm using Apple CarPlay at the moment, but the native infotainment system isn't great. There's the ability to customize it. You can add widgets and a whole bunch of different menu screens and menu options, but I just find it difficult. Even pairing my phone and sort of getting things like CarPlay working was a little bit of a faff. I haven't used the native sat-nav, so I can't comment. But the main instrument binnacle screen I like a great deal. I love these iconic kind of Alfa Romeo binnacle covers. It kind of harks back to cars of old and makes you feel like you're sat in a really special place. Now I'm on a dual carriageway, I can utilise another great feature of this car. It's adaptive cruise control, level 2 autonomous driving. It's not unique to this car, obviously, but what it does is it just means a long drive is such a relaxing place to be. You can literally just chew the miles in this car. And when it is just cruising along like we are at the moment at 70 miles an hour, it's when you get the most fuel efficiency. But you can sit here and you can enjoy the hi-fi system, which is great. You can just enjoy the comfortable seats. It's got great visibility. It's just a brilliant mile-munching car. In terms of practicality, I've got quite a bit of stuff with me, even though there's only me and the pooch. The boot's a good size. Obviously you don't have that extra practicality of maybe a kind of estate format or a hatchback format, but I don't think that's a bad thing. And then there's plenty of room in the rear for passengers. Not that I've had those either. But you're cruising along in this car on a motorway. It's so quiet. It's dealing with the pretty horrid potholes we've seen today, to be honest, very well. The road noise and wind noise is pretty good. There's a bit of a whistle from the door mounted mirror just there, but only just in the background. It's not that pronounced. Yeah, a really nice place to do a long journey, this car. So I'm coming towards the end of my journey home, and honestly the road's dried up a little bit, the sun's come out, the grip levels have gone up a little bit, and it just means you can push on even more in this car, and it's such a rewarding car to drive. My final thoughts about Giulia is my heart says Giulia Quadrifoglio every time. Phenomenal car, amazing soundtrack, great performance, beautiful looks. But my head says Veloce, and in a way it's a little bit like, for me, I'm sure many of you know I used to have an Audi S4, and I always said that was really the thinking man's car to buy instead of the RS4. It gave 80% of the RS4 in terms of deliverables, but for much less money, and it was a cheaper car to live with. And it's the same thing with this Veloce. It delivers a good 80%, maybe more, of what you would get from a Quadrifoglio, but they're cheaper to buy, they're cheaper to run. They don't look that dissimilar to a Quadrifoglio. And you can really get into that special Alfa feel. And I know for some people there's still concerns around Alfa Romeo in terms of reliability and long-term running costs. There may be some issues around dealer network. But in terms of a car to create an impression for people to get comments, I mean, you drive one of these around, and I've only been driving this the last few days, and it's a car people say, oh, what's that? And they want to know, and it's a good looking car. And then when you get it on a nice bit of road, they're just fantastic cars to drive. I can't give it enough plaudits. Are there things I don't like? Yeah, of course I don't like the infotainment system. There are bits of the interior that are starting to look their age now, but do I care? No, not really, because it's just a mega saloon car. If you want a sports saloon car with good looks and good performance, it's got to be on your list. It's got to be on your test drive list. And when you get it on a nice bit of road like this, and you're able to push on a little bit, this gearbox, we come down into this corner, the brakes have got a lovely feel, down into fourth, down into third, super quick on the way down, and then back on the way up. Just a really quick, slick gearbox with these lovely column-mounted shifter paddles. It's just great. Getting hard on the brakes down into third. I've got the flickers going. Oh, look, twisty road sign for the next 1.5 miles. I'd like a bigger gear select or gear indicator on the dash. But honestly, the road's just a little bit damp in here, so just a little bit careful, because you've got obviously rear wheel drive, but that gives you great balance. It's got a lovely feeling front end. In we go. What do you reckon, Petrol Pup? Are you enjoying that? It's not got the best soundtrack in the world. It's a bit muted and a bit meh. But honestly, it doesn't detract from that feeling, the dynamic feeling of driving the car. And you end up catching up cars in front quite a lot in this car. There you go. I would love to know what your thoughts were. Would you go Quadrifoglio? Would you go Veloce? There's Speciale underneath this as well. There are other trim levels, but I think for me, when you get this with the teledial wheels, it's just got something about it. But I hope you enjoyed that. A video. I've had this car for a number of reasons, on lots of miles this week. I used it to drive to the airport to go on an Alfa event in Italy, and I really wanted to kind of just get into the whole world of Alfa on my way to see the new Giulia. But I thought I'd do a film while I had it as well. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed that. If you did, give me a thumbs up. Comments below are always welcome. And if you haven't done so already, please subscribe to Petrol Ped for plenty more content to come. And from me and the Petrol Pup, you alright, dude? Yeah? Oh, were you fast asleep? Oh no. I'll just see you on the next film. Take care, guys. Drive safe.